Welcome back. We're the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael.
And I'm James.
And tonight we're discussing the season finale of Series 1 of the revival, two-part story, Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. First aired June 2005 and written by Russell T Davies. As I'm sure you know, this is the final story, starring Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor. Past this point, we may get introduced to a new Doctor at the end of this one. This has been one that we've seen plenty of times, but it's always a pleasure to revisit. But James, if you were to jump into the plot of this one?
Yeah, of course. The plot, which we just wrote ourselves, it works enough. The Doctor, Rose, and Captain Jack are separated and forced to compete in twisted and deadly games on the game station. But there's a darker plan in place that will put the Doctor to the ultimate test.
Yeah, and these aforementioned games, Rose is lucky to get thrown into the classic show, The Weakest Link, with the android. It's always good pleasure. The Doctor gets to experience some Big Brother action in this very classy-looking house. And Jack, as befits his character, is sort of in the parody of What Not to Wear, which I don't recognize. And from my understanding, a lot of people didn't recognize at the time either. But hey, it's certainly topical.
Yeah, the funny thing is that while I recognize the name Big Brother, I've never seen any Big Brother. I haven't seen, as far as I know, a single scene of Big Brother in my entire life. All I know of Big Brother is literally from Doctor Who.
Yeah, you're not wrong. See, I watch cool shows like Survivor. Now that's what's up.
It is a show.
There you
This
are.
is true. The actors, did you want to discuss some of the actors before we go into some of the specifics for this one?
Yeah, we can jump into the actors. Naturally, we have the Ninth Doctor on Rose being Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper. John Barrowman is here naturally as Captain Jack. Then we have a bunch of smaller characters. Well, I don't say a bunch, but we have Linda with a Y, played by Joe Joyner. There is Davidge, who I think is actually credited as like male programmer or something like that. But his name's Davidge, played by Joe Stone Fewings.
It's the most British name I've ever heard.
Yeah. There's a Roderick, played by Patterson Joseph. Then in the second episode, Parting of the Ways, we get some returning faces. Noel Clarke comes back as Mickey. Camille Coduri comes back as Jackie. So we get to see some of the classics again. And this sort of goes without saying, but we also get the first inkling of the 10th Doctor at the end of the second episode, being David Tennant's first time on screen.
Yeah, no, it's really strange seeing David Tennant in Christopher Eccleston's leather jacket. It just doesn't feel right.
He just looks so young, too.
And he looks so young, it's amazing. I mean, honestly, of course, I think we commented before, maybe we didn't, but John Barrowman looks incredibly young as Captain Jack this season. And obviously, we last saw him in 2020, probably, in Revolution of the Daleks, I think.
Yeah, one of those. I mean, to be honest, I still think he looked pretty decent. I mean, you could tell he was older. I wish his story was better, but he still has some of the same suave to him.
Yeah, they tried, I suppose. But no, I'm quite looking forward to watching through Torchwood because we get a lot more Captain Jack there, and there's a lot of good stuff. But it is interesting because how do we even get Torchwood when what we see of Jack in this episode? Maybe we'll find out later. Maybe we won't.
Those are those vague hints that he likes dropping. It's always good fun.
Not really vague hints if you would just remember Utopia more. But
nah, bro, it's cool.
Okay.
Speaking of which, though, this is the episode that first features the term Torchwood. It's sort of like a throwaway question when Rose is experiencing the weakest link. And it's referred simply as a famous Earth Institute, but the famous Earth Institute of Torchwood. And naturally, we get a lot more about Torchwood in the upcoming season. So I sort of like how they sort of seeded it in here, only to give it more playfulness later on.
You know Russell T Davies was smiling about that when he wrote that line.
You know, I guess speaking of things revolving around characters in Torchwood, there's also another reference to the face of Bo, who we've seen, a handful of times, once on a TV screen, I think, and once back in the End of the World.
Yeah, we saw him in the Honor of the Warlord, and then we saw him announcing that the face of Bo was pregnant in the long game.
Yeah, I guess technically we saw him in the Doctor Dances.
Wow, I mean, yeah, okay, if you're going to count that.
Yep, but it just mentions the face of Bo as being the quote oldest inhabitant of the ISIP galaxy. It's one of the few questions that Rose actually got right during her time on the Weakest Link.
Well, she got more than a few right, actually. She actually did make it to the last round. So, give her some credit.
It's because of Roderick's kindness.
Well, I like how Roderick thought he was going to get money from the Daleks. He didn't, but
No, I almost feel bad for Roderick's toy, but I also sort of don't. It's just sort of a dig.
well, I mean, the thing is that Rose wasn't wrong when she told that one woman, "Oh, I had to vote for someone." They do have to vote for someone. At the end of the day, that's part of the terribleness of the situation that they were in. And obviously, if you've seen the two-parter, you know that past what the 30-minute mark, we're out of the source and on to just the main base of the game station.
Yeah, which makes sense because you can't really expect the Doctor to hang around the Big Brother house all day. And boy, does he not stay long.
He really does stay long. But honestly, the whole setup, it works so amazing. We see them all wake up in 3 different games, so separated, of course. None of them have the memory of exactly how they got there. They don't know where the other 2 people that they were traveling with are. They're just waking up here and they're in this situation they could not have expected.
Yeah, and they barely know where they are. They're just like in some facsimile of a game show that they're somewhat familiar with, and it's just sort of an awkward time. But it has tributes a bit much, but it does have sort of like a classy feel to it, sort of almost mesmerizing in a way. I mean, the Doctor's in this really gaudy looking house, and much like James, I've never seen any episode of Big Brother, but I'm going to assume that's what the houses look like.
Keep in mind, this is 2005 era.
yeah, I guess that does put some things into perspective. Which, on a side note, because of that, this could theoretically feel a bit dated for those aspects. But honestly, I don't think it harms the episode at all, to be honest.
No, I think it actually stands out quite fine, this two-parter. I mean, once they get out of the game source and they get to the game station proper, which is the name of the satellite they're on, and things really just take a completely different tone. But what I liked about it was not only do we see the reactions of the Doctor, Rose, and Jack waking up, although to be fair, Jack was taking everything in stride. He looked like he was kind of just having a fun time.
Let's see, Jack was lucky enough to get transported into a what not to wear type show. It's, I guess, a fashion, so like fashion advice. And Jack is somewhat of I don't know what you would say. He thinks he's a handsome guy. And
To be fair.
Yeah, he's not wrong. I mean, ladies, viewership just went up.
There's so many great lines. Of course, the Doctor, you have got to be kidding me. It might be one of the best cold opens.
Yeah, so I mean, Jack's certainly happy to try on new clothing, see what works for him, see what might not be his style. I mean, now we'll mix blacks with colors. I mean,
it makes the color look boring and the black look drab or something like that.
Yeah, I think Jack is just having a fun time, naturally until the face-off. But I mean, up until then, enjoying himself.
Yeah, but not only do we see their reactions waking up in the situation, we also see the reactions of not producers, the people. What would be the term? Technician? Like I'm not a TV person.
I think technician works. I think they are credited as like programmers or something in the show, but yeah, sort of technicians who are sort of, I guess, I don't even know the correct TV terminology.
Yeah, they're basically the producers and people who are making so. I suppose it goes to commercial. God knows what the commercials are like in this world.
I'm trying to think about it.
I guess we don't have this information written down anywhere, but this world, by the way, this is over 100 years after the long game. So what year would that place this in? Yeah, in the year 200,100. So that's a bit in the future. I mean, again, think about that. Even the mutants is only like 3,500 something. So we're way, and I know we talked about it on the long game, but we are just way out there in terms of timeline.
Yeah, naturally, this episode sort of feels like a sequel to The Long Game. In fact, the episode titled The Long Game didn't have as much relevance to the episode as much as it does to this one, when the term, in fact, The Long Game is referenced. So it's always sort of nice. I think it's sort of nice foreshadowing.
It is, and one of those producers was the aforementioned Davies, and I quite liked him as a character. I thought he was a lot of fun. He and another producer are just confused because though watching these game shows play out over 60 channels or something like that.
Yeah, it's quite a few channels.
Maybe it's probably even more than that. They just have hundreds of game shows all running simultaneously from this game station. People die in these shows. People don't choose to go to these shows. They literally get picked at random and just sent to a game show.
Yeah, that does lead me to one. Annoyance is really strong, but it's just sort of funny. So, as Linda with the wife explains to the doctor, no one chooses to be on Big Brother. They could just randomly be chosen. If they happen to win, they get to live. The doctor says it's the owl. She's like, well, isn't that enough? Which I think is funny. Anyway.
Not only is it funny, but that's when the doctor's like, oh no, I'm done with this society.
Yeah, well, you should have tried harder, fun. But if you're lucky enough to get chosen for the weakest link and you actually live, you actually get money from that. Or credits. You actually get an actual reward. You get more than life. So I think it's so funny how apparently you do get something for some of the shows if you're randomly chosen, but you just get the bare minimum for other ones. So that's a quality society.
Well, I mean, you have it actually rather book, but it is actually very similar now that I think about it to The Running Man by Stephen King, who was at the time using the pen name Richard Bachman. The Running Man was, of course, adapted into an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, which I haven't seen, and quite frankly looks like an abomination that has no relevance to the actual source material. So read the Running Man, don't watch the movie. Or if you want to watch the movie, fine, but don't think that the Running Man book is anything like that. I didn't even think about this before, but this is actually how the games in the Running Man worked. I mean, I don't know how much you even know about the Running Man, but it has a society not too dissimilar. It's a little different in that people did choose to be on these games, but they only chose to be on these games because they had complete destitution. It was the only real way to get money if you were a poor working person and you couldn't get work. Maybe because you were subversive in one way or another. And so, there's actually quite similar to this in a lot of ways. But other producers were confused because these people just pop up randomly in these games. Keep in mind, the doctor popped up when there's literally just 3 people left in the house in Big Brother. And I've never seen Big Brother, but I'm pretty sure it's probably much like Survival, where the last people there are, the later it is into the game. So they're literally down to 3 people. Then some random guy just pops up there. And the programmers don't know what's going on. They see Rose pop up in the weakest link. And she doesn't even seem to think that there's any danger. She's just laughing because she doesn't know answers to questions. And she's just having fun. Because at that point, she didn't realize how serious the situation was. And you could just see the look of horror. Now, granted, these people were literally, I suppose they weren't in charge of the games, but they were working on making sure the games went smoothly. So that is a problem.
Well, yeah, I guess the way I see it is if you could choose to either work for the company or be randomly chosen and potentially killed, you might send in the job application to the company. Like, I imagine they would be immune from being chosen if they're working as these programmers. So, in a society like this, can you really blame them?
Well, in a society like this, you need the Freedom 15 or whatever they were called.
Oh, God. That's a good point. 100 years previous, maybe they could have.
I don't remember what their name was. They were anarchists, but besides that, they were fine. But no, so all of, I suppose, the output of this satellite went through one woman who was just known as the controller, who has been the controller since, I think they said she was 5.
Yeah, since she was young anyway.
Yeah, she was young anyway. And the controller, by the way, is played by an actress named Martha Kopp. And so this is, at this point, almost 20 years old. I'm not going to feel bad about supporting this. The controller is basically why the doctor is even here in the first place. Because when these programmers are talking to the controller saying, hey, there's a problem in the games, who authorized this transmat? And by the way, we said transmats all the way back in the Seeds of Death, It's just a second Doctor story. So I do like how they're using that type of terminology. But this is what you know who authorized the transmit. Why are these people in these games? The controller's like, there's no one there, don't worry about it. And because they're all wired into the system, they do seem pretty inhuman. But it turns out that they literally brought the Doctor and Rose, well, mostly just the Doctor, the other two are just lucky to be brought along, to take on the people who are in control of the satellite, the game station, which is, technically speaking, under the control of the Bad Wolf Corporation. And we see it just plastered on the wall. And not only is it control of the Bad Wolf Corporation, and not only does this take place 100 years after the long game, this is literally Satellite 5. This is the same exact satellite, just 100 years after the long game. And in fact, when the Doctor comes to the realization, when he's talking to Linda with a Y, he kind of almost has a, not crisis of faith, but it kind of throws him for a loop.
Yeah, we don't see this all that often. The funny thing is, I think we did mention this when we were discussing the Wheel of Ice, how the Doctor never really stays around and, I don't know, deals with the consequences of his actions. Like, he just, I guess, sort of hopes the society will move back to the way it's supposed to be or the way he wants it to be, or just another way that's not under some type of tyrant. And he hopes it's going to work out and he just moves on. But we actually see the consequences of him trying out of the, as corrupt and biased as it would have been, out of the news and media information in the long game. And we see where it leads here. And I think it's a really fun realization.
Yeah, basically, the Doctor's talking to Linda, and this is the conversation. But it's all gone wrong. I mean, history's gone wrong again. This should be the fourth great and wonderful human empire. I don't understand. Last time I was here, I picked it right. No, but that's when it first went wrong. 100 years ago. Like you said, all the news channels, they just sat down overnight. But that was me. I did that. There's nothing left in their place. No information. The whole planet just froze. The government, the economy, they collapsed. That was the start of it. 100 years of hell. Oh my God. And just the look on the Doctor's face when he realizes that it's kind of his fault. It's so nice to see the Doctor actually face consequences. No, of course. It wasn't quite all the Doctor's fault because the long game had the geographers and the editor, but they had their own bosses. The geographers, as we learned in this episode, was actually implanted by people behind the scenes. And when I say people, I mean the actual antagonists of this story, the Daleks, who are back, not just a weak Dalek who barely survived falling through a crack in time, not a crack in time, that's different, but barely survived falling to Earth in Utah. We're talking about an entire Dalek fleet. Probably, 200,000 Daleks?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number thrown around. I'm just going to say it's a lot.
Either way, it's more than have any right to exist. No, of course, the Daleks sort of exist, but a single Dalek ship apparently survived the Time War, was able to hide in the Earth orbit, and they used, I suppose they used the game station, to use a secret transmission to hide the entire fleet so nobody could actually, on Earth, nobody could actually see them.
Well, I mean, yeah, but first they would have to build up a fleet. So.
Well, yes, but they built up a fleet, and the way they built up the fleet, and I do wonder about how this all works, because obviously there's 100 years between this and the long game. In the long game, society seemed pretty garbage, but I don't recall anybody just disappearing randomly or dying.
To be fair, we had the sort of a limited scope in the long game. We don't know what humanity was actually like down on Earth. I mean, so for all we know, people were just sort of disappearing all the time, and we just didn't have the information.
Yes, this is true, but the point is the Daleks are actually created out of cells of a human, and this was all orchestrated by the Emperor Dalek, or the Dalek Emperor. There are different terms, ways that the term is thrown around. For the record, there have been about 7 or 8 known Dalek Emperors, and it's not actually quite clear which one this is, just because one, of course, different media contradict. Welcome to Doctor Who. It's the joys of it. And 2, because this is the time war, it gets extremely complicated. of what was happening when. Davros apparently was lost with only within the first quote-unquote year of the Time War, or something to that effect. Now, I don't know how something so extra time like this can even have years, but that's way besides any point I can comprehend. This Dalek Emperor is a ship that the Doctor, he thought he saw it destroyed, but that ship was able to escape and hide here, and using like one soul out of every million of a human being, they were able to slowly rebuild a Dalek army. Now, this is interesting in a lot of ways, because one, the humans who died on these game shows, they didn't actually die in the game show. They got transported to the Dalek ship, where they were then used to create more Daleks. What this also means, and we saw a bit of this in Dalek, is because these Daleks are literally made with a human soul, which, for the record, according to them, even mentioning that is blasphemy. And it's blasphemy because since they were made out of a human soul, they were basically created from the dirt. The Dalek Emperor has decided that he's a bit of a god. He decides that he is the god of all Daleks.
Yeah, these Daleks sort of hit differently than the average Dalek. They have a different style to them. I mean, as the Doctor says, they're insane. The Dalek Emperor basically believes himself or treats himself as he's a god. I mean, this is a pretty quality quote. I reached into the dirt and made new life. Dirt, of course, being the human population. I am the god of all Daleks. And the Dalek Emperor says this, and the other Daleks, they're cool with it, as they start screaming and screeching, worship him.
It's so interesting because it all starts off with the Doctor. Of course, he's going through in his heart, wondering how there's so many Daleks here, when there really should have been. There weren't all that many Daleks on the ship when it disappeared, or there should have been, and now there's a whole fleet. And the Emperor explains the whole taking the souls from the humans. And then when the Doctor mentions that makes them half human, the Daleks all start screaming, blasphemy! Blasphemy! I can't do a Dalek voice justice, but I do like the Dalek's voice. And the voice for the Dalek Emperor was so incredibly deep. It was amazing. There's a howl of a voice there. And the Doctor's like, when do Daleks have a concept of blasphemy? And then that's when the Dalek Emperor starts boasting about he's literally a god. As all the Daleks are floating around screaming, worship him, the Doctor says, the quote that Margaret just said, that they've gone insane, which is absolutely hilarious, because I'm sure this one wasn't intentional, but that's just one of those moments that Russell T Davies has where maybe he's not the biggest fan of religion.
Yeah, at least organized religion.
Yeah, the second the Dalek says, hey, let's worship him, the second the idea of worship comes up, the Doctor decides that somebody's insane. Now, of course, there are different circumstances. This isn't normal worship. Because the Doctor theorizes that they're just alone by themselves at the odds of a universe with no one to talk to. It's not too surprising that they have these delusions, and furthermore, because they were created out of a human soul, every single one of these Daleks has a lot of self-hatred. They hate themselves because they know they're not actually pure, but they're, quote-unquote, the only Daleks left, so they have to do the best they can. The funny thing is, if these Daleks ever met any Daleks from somewhere else, they would be exterminated like that, because no other Dalek would consider these Daleks pure at all. And these Daleks, on some level, have to know that. But of course, since they think they're the only Daleks left, it doesn't really matter.
And I do think it's interesting that once it's revealed the Daleks are behind all of this, the Doctor goes through a type of, I don't know, I guess from his perspective, the Time Lord destroyed both the Daleks and his own people, the Time Lords. And he said he was almost okay with that, because at least the Daleks were destroyed. But finding out that the Daleks found a way to survive, and that his people are all gone, he says they quote-unquote died for nothing. So you can imagine the Doctor feels exceptionally depressed about that.
You know, this was a very hard time for the Doctor, because he sees a whole Dalek fleet, he sees that they survived, and he knows his people didn't. And so he has to try to stop these Daleks and their plan, which for the record is invading Earth. I mean, it's Daleks, it's what they do. They invade Earth, they create empires. I mean, again, this Dalek Emperor thought he was a god. He wanted to create a paradise on Earth.
He did use a lot of religious terminology throughout the episode, like paradise on Earth and so on and so forth. And it's sort of fun that they played with that motif.
It is, and I do wonder if you guys handled a Bible or something, because he was using some quotes directly taken from the Bible. It was strange. But another thing that's interesting is that the music for the episode went all out because, of course, this Dalek thinks he's a god. They were literally using, and I'm not a music scholar in a religious music scholar, but they were using what sounded like religious chants for the motif for the Dalek Emperor, and they were showing all the Daleks. It was just using this really cool religious chanting that sounded very orchestral. The music was really good in this episode, in this story. It really worked very well, especially with the themes.
And so at that point, the Doctor has to try to find a way to save planet Earth, to save what few people are left on the game station, because there's a bunch of contestants. I mean, these games right now are over. Once it's revealed the Daleks are behind all of this, I'm not sure the people who are unknowingly working for them much care to continue working for them.
I mean, to be fair, it's not like they're going to be paid.
You're probably not wrong. But the Doctor has to find a way out of this exceptionally tough situation. And he comes up with the idea of a delta wave. Even Jack knows what a delta wave is, so that's so fun. But apparently, and the Dalek Emperor knows this himself, the way it would sort of work is it would wipe out all living things, and it doesn't matter if it's Dalek or human. And unfortunately, Earth, and naturally other people on Earth, would be within the range of the delta wave. So the Doctor has one of those things where he can either sort of kill humans and Daleks all around the space station, yeah, naturally, and himself, or he could just sort of let the Daleks quote unquote win.
And it's interesting because, of course, the Doctor, if he had more time, would have been able to make the delta wave only affect Daleks. He mentions that mostly it's just a time issue. Like, he had to construct this thing in what? Maybe 40 minutes? Maybe an hour? It's hard to tell exactly how much time had passed, but it wasn't very long because the Daleks were invading the ship, or about to invade the ship they were on, the satellite. So he didn't have all that much time to put it together. So I guess it's almost lucky that he got as far as he got.
Yeah, and it's that portion in the Pardon the Ways, which it's like one of the more difficult choices the Doctor probably has to make. It's naturally reminiscent of Genesis of the Daleks, actually. Although, I mean, I think that was a much easier choice as opposed to this one.
I mean, I suppose it might have been. For the record, the Doctor even says himself that he wanted to be destroying humanity, that there would be colonies, which is all nice and good. And for the record, now granted, I'm not the Doctor, and I don't have his morality, so I actually think he sort of used the delta wave, because what's going to happen was the Doctor is not going to use the delta wave, and if there was a Deus Ex Wolf, and the Dalek Emperor even had a good line about how, because of the Doctor's cowardice, that humanity would be harvested. Now, it's funny because, again, I suppose what the Dalek Emperor means is that he would use them to create more Daleks, but it's still creating Daleks out of humans. But I suppose he's a god. No one gets to question how gods work. In fact, you should still worship him. I don't know why, for the record, the Daleks thought for a second that the Doctor was going to worship the Dalek Emperor. But I suppose if you have a god, you want to try to have more people understand that he's your god. He wasn't all that wrong that these Daleks were insane. And I know we've been jumping around a lot for this one, but that's because there's been so much in this episode. It's just a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning that Dalek Emperor may not be the only god in town. Because once the Doctor figures out that this delta wave is probably not going to work out at how he would like it ideally to work out, he pretty much knows that he's going to die. He knows that Jack's going to die, that everyone, at least on the space station, is likely going to die. So he sort of tricks Rose into going into the TARDIS and being transported back home, which is where we see Jackie and Mickey come back in.
Yeah, it's really nice. I've always appreciated that Russell T Davies used to care about extended family and friends. And seeing Jackie and Mickey, well, for the 5th time, 6th time this season.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw Mickey in Boomtown.
Yeah, we just saw Mickey in Boomtown. We just saw Jackie. I suppose last time we said Jackie, well, we got some Jackie flashbacks in Father's Day. So I suppose there's that. But current day, we last saw Jackie in Aliens of Land and World War III. Now, it's just nice seeing them just pop up again and again. And what I think is most interesting about this, and I didn't even think about this until watching it this time. We watched it yesterday for the record, from when we were recording this. But we, of course, see Mickey and Jackie help Rose. Rose, of course, is devastated. She didn't want to leave the doctor. She would rather die by the doctor's side than just live a quote-unquote normal life on Earth. Because, as she says, the doctor told her that you could have a better life. You could live a better way. It's a very nice little speech by Rose. When Billie Piper is emotional, like, that really works for me because she does those emotions so well. And we'll see more of that in Doomsday. Because I literally always tear up during Doomsday. Doomsday just goes really hard on that. But she's saying to Jackie and Mickey, I have nothing here. I want to be with the doctor. I want to see the universe. I want to, quote unquote, live that better way. She lets Jackie know that it was actually her who had been near her father when the father died. Of course, we see in Father's Day, we see the scene 2 times. The first time we see the scene, Jackie tells Rose that her father died alone after the hit and run. But then we see the scene again at the end of Father's Day, where Jackie tells Rose that there was a blonde woman seen next to her father as he died, and she never knew who that woman was. And Rose lets Jackie know, hey, that was me. That's who the doctor is because he's kind. He took me back so I could see him before he died. And that really, really throws Jackie for a loop. But then Jackie comes around because she knows that Rose is right, that Pete would, of course, want Rose to be out there with the doctor. So she comes in clutch with this huge shock that she somehow was able to convince someone to give up for a couple of hours. And then Rose becomes a god.
And this all comes back to the season outwards of Bad Wolf. See, the doctor was sort of confused when he notices it's the Bad Wolf Corporation. He even asks the Dalek Emperor about the whole Bad Wolf thing, like, hey, why are you throwing this word in my history? And I believe the classic replies, that is not of my design.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of a fun quote.
It's a quote I actually use in life sometimes. I'm sure nobody knows I'm quoting the Emperor Dalek, but...
And we get a scene in which Rose is sort of depressed that she's home. And it's a very striking scene, by the way, because one moment she's in a life and death track with the doctor on the spaceship, then she's in the TARDIS and boom, she's just back home eating lunch with Mickey and her mother. I mean, talk about a system shock.
Do they deliver?
Yeah, like just being thrown into the banality of common existence. That's something that every companion has to deal with. Well, unless you're Argic.
Jesus!
I know. I am a bad boy. But that's something that most companions have to deal with. Trying to transition back into everyday life. And I think they do a really good job showing Rose's struggle here. But she's having the conversation with Mickey and she notices some just graffiti that just says Bad Wolf. And then I'm not sure what causes her to jump from that to I must look into the heart of the TARDIS. But she makes that jump and she pretty much becomes a god. She takes in I forget what, the time force, the energy of the TARDIS.
Yeah, something akin to that. The life energy of the TARDIS.
And that's something that we even saw in the end of Boomtown when toward the climax, Margaret actually looks into the heart of the TARDIS and then she gets sort of transformed back into an egg. So Rose has some experience with the idea of the heart of the TARDIS. So she looks into it, like James says, Jackie came in clutch, got this giant-ass vehicle, and she was able to pry open the console so Rose could indeed look into the heart of the TARDIS, and she largely became a god, to be honest. She's able to bring the TARDIS back to the doctor because otherwise it never would have worked.
Yes, the doctor said in the emergency protocol 1 message to Rose, a nice little hologram, so Rose would have one last look at the doctor, basically before she never sees him again, that he would prefer Rose just lock the TARDIS doors and leave the TARDIS be, let the TARDIS die. History would kind of just bury it, nobody will really notice it, and it would just be forgotten. He just wants Rose to live her best life. But her best life is as a god.
Yeah, as she says herself. Oh, I don't even want to say she says herself because at this point she's like half TARDIS? I don't know. Does that mean Sutek's in her on a side note? I have no idea. Does that mean that she's half Saxy because the TARDIS is named Saxy? I don't know. There's a lot of things that we're just not clear on. But as Rose slash Sutek slash TARDIS say, I am the bad wolf. I invented myself. Now, I think this is a exceptionally good 2-part episode. I think it's honestly almost perfect. I think it's paced really well, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. I think they made a lot of good decisions. I do think this quote-unquote solution to Bad Wolf is somewhat underwhelming. Like, she just threw the words Bad Wolf throughout her own history, so she knew to look into the TARDIS at some point. It just doesn't entirely connect to me what it actually means.
It was something she said to Mickey that perhaps it wasn't a warning, perhaps it's a message to let her know that there is a way back.
I guess if you can look at Bad Wolf and say, I guess, like I said, I'm not sure where she jumped from Bad Wolf to look into the heart of the TARDIS. I guess she was just sort of messing with the way back and then it came to her, but I'm just not personally wild about that resolution.
No, I've never liked that resolution all that much. I guess from her perspective, she always thought there's a warning when she realizes, oh, it might be a message, and then she's probably still this entire time wondering, how do I get back to save the Doctor? And then it probably hits her, oh, wait a second, the Doctor Manson, the heart of the TARDIS was psychic, so her whole plan that seemed to get forced was to speak to the heart of the TARDIS, maybe not speak to, mentally connect, whatever, so the TARDIS will take her back to the Doctor. Now, from there, I guess he just dies, because I don't think she was expecting to become a god, but at least she would have died on her terms, and not just living a safe life without being able to help the Doctor. So I guess, in some ways, that would be a win.
Yeah, and when she pops back, she pretty much, without any difficulty at all, destroys the entire Dalek fleet, including the Dalek Emperor. It's not even a problem. I mean, they're gone, bruh.
You know, the Daleks just bragging, you cannot kill me, I am a god, I am immortal. And Rose just literally disintegrates the entire Dalek fleet with just a wave of her hand.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I mean by it somewhat underwhelming. Like, it would have been interesting to see a different solution to that. But that's in the scheme of things, I think it's somewhat of a small thing, despite the fact that it actually leads directly into the Doctor's death and regeneration. Because he's able to take the energy out of Rose to sort of save Rose from, I guess you could sort of say, overheating. She doesn't become the Dr. Rose like Donna later becomes.
No, though it's kind of similar in a lot of ways.
It really is. I mean, he could save Rose, he could have saved Donna, because he's willing to kiss Rose, that's how he saves her.
And of course, before the Doctor saves her from burning up, as Michael was saying, she not only destroys the entire Dalek fleet, she also, as she says, brings life. No, I'm not sure if she knew she resurrected Jack. I'm not sure if she was trying to resurrect everybody. I'm not sure exactly how that works.
I was just going to say, I don't even think it's she. I think it's just more the TARDIS energy. I mean, definitely Rose herself didn't know. Yeah, she had no memory at all. I mean, we saw, like, I think she was saying, oh, I was in the TARDIS or I was outside, and she just had, like, no recollection of what happened once she was able to actually look into the heart of the TARDIS, which is why I think, largely speaking, the TARDIS entity sort of took over.
Well, I mean, this is true. I'm just wondering what she was thinking at the time, though. That's the thing.
Or what the TARDIS entity was thinking.
Yeah, at the time. Did they know they were resurrecting Jack?
Yeah, I sort of assumed that when they said, I'm going to bring life, they might have everyone on the station. It would have been fun to see Roger come back. I want my money!
I mean, maybe not him.
But we do see Jack. He died, by the way. They didn't mention that. But during the Dalek invasion of Satellite 5 / the game station, Jack tries to mount the defense with a handful of people who are willing to fight back against the Daleks. It goes pretty terribly, to be honest.
To be fair, it's never going to go good, but he gave it a howl of a shot. Yeah, and to the end, Jack fought. Even his machine gun ran out of bullets. He pulls out his pistol and just starts shooting the Daleks with that. I almost think the Daleks had some respect for how much tenacity he showed.
Yeah, but unfortunately he dies, but fortunately he lives. Now, he does happen to hear the sound of the TARDIS dematerializing, but he's not able to make it there nearly quick enough to actually connect back up with the Doctor. So that's sort of depressing. And it's sort of what James referenced earlier. It's not clear how he gets from this game station in this timeline to where we next see him. And that's something I'm pretty sure, would I even know?
No, like I said, I'm pretty sure they mentioned in Utopia.
Oh, yeah, okay, I guess once I see Utopia again, they'll at least they'll alleviate some of this.
Yeah, so they elucidate on some of these issues.
So yeah, Jack comes back. Rose is sort of killed from the TARDIS overloading thing that will probably have destroyed her body. But unfortunately, the Doctor took in this energy, and he was able to probably expel a lot of it, but he was able to expel nearly as much of it. He notices that his hand starts glowing. He tries to give Rose a crash course in regeneration. Now, in my opinion, he does sort of a shitty job, but he tries.
It means I'm going to change.
Yeah,
Well, it's going to give a new sort.
Yeah, not in this body, not with this face. Just explain it, bro.
Now, granted, he's dying, so...
Yeah, he had some limited time, and he wanted to go to Barcelona. Maybe he will, but not with that face. We do, however, see the face that comes next.
Yeah, and of course, this is the regeneration scene. I think one of the first regeneration scenes where the Doctor is standing up, which just how did it try now all Time Lords regenerate was standing up. When I think throughout the entire classic series, whenever a regeneration happened, I mean, the Doctor's die, basically died. So when you die, you don't usually die standing up on the whole. So even as late as the movie, we see the Doctor, quote unquote, die while he's on the operating table, and then we see him regenerate while he's in the mortuary. So praise so the Doctors have just regenerated laying down. But so this is the first time we see the Doctor regenerate standing up, and that's just going to keep happening from now on, which is fine. Like, it's more dramatic this way. I get it. They wanted to make it look nice, and I suppose they thought this looked better than just Christopher Eccleston lying down on the ground of the TARDIS. So that's fine.
It certainly looks more dramatic, and that's probably what they were going for.
It certainly does. And then we get David Tennant, who is concerned about having new teeth.
Yeah, and like James mentioned earlier, it's really strange seeing David Tennant, one, seeing him so young, but two, seeing him in Christopher Eccleston's like dark clothing, the jacket. It's just strange seeing him in that.
Yeah, David Tennant always had such a snazzy dress style to him. He wore these long, I don't even know what they are. These long, is that a coat? No, seriously, what is it?
Yeah, I'm not a fashion guy. I would never be on that show, what not to wear, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, David Tennant has a very unique style as the Doctor. I mean, most Doctors do. And it's always strange seeing, after regeneration, a new Doctor in the old Doctor's clothing. I mean, it's always sort of nice. It's, in a way, sort of refreshing is not quite the right word, but it's just nice to see how they look in a completely different style from what we're used to seeing them in later on.
Yeah, and I do think for the record, Russell T Davies made a mistake when he had the 13th Doctor clothes not be on the 14th Doctor. I know he had his reasons, he's explained it, but I disagree with his reasons. I think it's garbage. It would have worked fine if it had been a plan of the toy maker. Then it would have made actual sense of the universe.
There's a lot of things in that throughout those parts that could have been, I think, eased a bit if it had been more of an explicit, the toy maker's just fucking with the Doctor. But they just didn't go that route.
No, they didn't. I'm always going to resent that. Unless they come back around for the next City Gatwa season and have the toy maker come back. Oh, by the way, do you enjoy this massive estimate of your history? And then you can speak more of the great German.
Goes clapping down the Strassen, yeah.
I do love his great use of the German language, or the great butchering, one or the other. But it's nice seeing David Tennant here, and obviously we're going to be leading into the David Tennant seasons coming up after this one, slowly but surely. And so that's going to be exciting talking about David Tennant as a Doctor, who is a Doctor who is really fun to waltz, but it's also very true that waltzing back, maybe you don't realize from your first watch when you're younger, but David Tennant's Doctor is a dick. It's kind of hilarious, and he doesn't mean to be. But he's a very interesting personality where he really doesn't give a shit. In certain ways, obviously he cares about humans enough that he doesn't want them to die, but he's a very interesting undercurrent to him.
And naturally, that's something that we can see coming up. It's going to be interesting to see some Ollie David Tanley episodes again. Some of them sort of random too, so that's always fun. And naturally, that will lead us into the timeline. But before we jump into the timeline, there's just some small notes I want to touch on in this two-parter. Some random miscellaneous stuff that sort of skimmed over. One, I think it's interesting how in Boomtown, Jack is sort of characterized as almost being interested in technology. When he finds Margaret's extrapolator, which on the side note pops up in this two-parter, it's used to sort of be like, what, a force field for the TARDIS?
Yeah, the Doctor is able to somehow fit it into the TARDIS systems and actually use the extrapolator as a small force field for the TARDIS, which is actually really fun. Because you see Boomtown, you think it's mostly just a throwaway episode, but it's actually extremely important to the finale. Because not only is he able to make it a force field for the TARDIS, which is pretty nifty, by the way, the Daleks did not appreciate it, for the record. But he also is able to make it a force field for the top 5 lavas of the game station. So that's a powerful piece of equipment, to quote the random salesman.
Yeah, and I think this does a really good job of touching back on almost all of the episodes of this season. It's like a celebration of Christopher Eccleston's time. Like James said earlier, Rose tells her mother about the events of Father's Day, at least a brief excursion about the events of Father's Day.
Sadly, Jackie didn't get the learn about the Reapers.
Yeah, she did learn everything. Rose briefly tells Jackie about the events of Father's Day. We get to see some flashbacks when Rose is considering this whole bad wolf thing. We get to see Gwyneth again from back in The Unquiet Dad. So we have like a lot of things in this episode that sort of call back to previous ones, like the extrapolate, which is nice. And the whole thing with Jack being sort of more interested in technology sort of comes up here too, because after he avoids his face-off with these robots in, a very amusing scene, opening of Bad Wolf, the individual episodes, just so fun, seeing all of them do their own game stuff. Jack is able to actually sort of build sort of a makeshift gun type thing. So it sort of plays into his whole interest in technology, which I think past this point, we don't see a ton of.
Yeah, I mean, we see, and might go see in the 4th season of Torchwood, we do see that they're collecting alien debris, basically, on Earth. But it's more of a protective thing to keep it away from the public and governments. It's not really for Jack to mess around with. I've only seen the 4th season twice, but even in the twice I've seen, I don't remember him messing around with the technology too much.
Yeah, it's possible that something that easily he could do, but just trained seeing him actually being interested in doing it. Like, I don't doubt that he has a lot of knowledge, but there's a difference between knowing something and actually wanting to do something. So it's just so strange seeing that characteristic thrown on his character here.
And speaking of things that Jack has knowledge on, apparently he thought the Time War was a myth.
And that's something I was surprised about because, remember, Jack actually worked for the Time Agency. And I would have assumed that the Time Agency, given that they're a Time Agency, had some type of involvement in the Time War. And maybe the higher-ups did, but certainly Jack didn't. He thought it was an actual myth. So that's sort of fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because from Jack's point of view, according to him, the Daleks were one of the most dangerous threats in the universe. And then they just disappeared. Now, of course, what that means is Davros, or whoever, the Dalek Emperor, basically recalled every Dalek in existence to come fight the Time War. So that's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I think we get some really good Jack action in this two-parter. It's a pretty good sequence during, following the supposed death of Rose. And that's a very dramatic scene. The Doctor and Captain Jack have been trying to save Rose. She's in the weakest link. And they actually are able to get into the room where they're filming the game. Rose is running toward the Doctor. Then she gets shot and supposedly killed by the android. Side note, I'm always amused by the android. Just Rose's initial response, oh, the android.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Even when I don't have as much familiarity with the weakest link, I still find it hilarious how bemused and in shock Rose is.
And I think it's fascinating because the Doctor, because we see some drastically different reactions. The Doctor just sort of goes to his hands and knees, like in front of this pile of dust that was, quote unquote, Rose. Whereas Jack, he has this gun and he's pissed off. He is not happy. He says something like, "Your stupid freaking games killed her." And I think some people have made fun of that line. I actually think it's a very emotionally packed line. I mean, Jack's not been traveling with Rose all that long. I guess we don't technically know how long they've been traveling together. But
Keep in mind, there are like 4 books.
yeah, but they obviously have a good connection. And the fact that, I mean, just in front of him, Rose seems to have died. Jack is pissed. And I have 2 things, I guess, to say about that. One, I am happy that Bad Wolf went the way it did. They easily could have ended the episode with Rose dying. They could have found a way to fill up some time beforehand and just ended it with Rose getting shot as a cliffhanger. And I'm really happy they didn't do that because 1, I don't think anyone would have expected Rose to actually die. And 2, going the way that they did gives us sort of almost a couple moments of silence. We see the Doctor and Jack being sort of processed through this jail system. They have some mark shots taken of themselves. But then we see how quickly they get freed. And it's just a nice scene. You get to see some more action-packed Jack, and we get to see the Doctor again in the action too, which you don't see as often. It's just so fun.
Yeah, we literally see the Doctor, maybe not punch somebody, but certainly shove somebody to the floor.
Yeah, I know,
one of the guards.
It's like watching John Pertwee again. It's nice seeing Doctor get out in the action.
Oh, John Pertwee would have had a blast with this.
So I think it's a really strong sequence of events.
Yeah, and of course that leads to a great scene where they, armed, go up to the producers in the game station. Somebody tries to use the excuse, "Hey, we were just doing our job. We were just following orders." And the Doctor says, "With that line, you've just lost our right to talk to me."
Yeah. And actually, it's also worth mentioning Linda with a Y being one of the few people we see in the society who seems pretty decent. I'm sure there's plenty of decent people, but we don't see that many of them. But Linda with a Y is a nice woman. She even sort of asks if she could travel with the Doctor. Unfortunately, it's not to be. But the Doctor seemed to be perfectly willing to let her travel with him. That would have been pretty fun too. Captain Jack, Rose, and Linda with a Y out traveling together with the Doctor. It's like a 5th Doctor type thing. That would have been a nice little combination.
Yeah, Rose would have liked it.
Yeah, we don't see a ton of it because there's a bunch to get through. But yeah, I think Rose is just a tad jealous about what she sees as the Doctor and Linda with a Y sort of relationship. She does not seem like she's particularly pleased.
She really didn't. There's, I think, literally only one scene, but it's absolutely hilarious how obvious it was.
And I also wanted to mention 2 other quick things. One, the Doctor's speech to the Daleks at the end of the first part is fantastic. Rose is being held captive on the Dalek ship, and the Dalek's like, "Hey, you're not going to do anything. We have Rose." And he's like, No, I'm going to come for Rose, and I'm going to save the world, and I'm going to stop you. The Dalek's like, "You have no plan, you have no equipment, you have no way of doing this." And the Dalek's like, "Yeah, and that's it, that just terrify you." And he has that cocky grin on his face, and it's such a fantastic Christopher Eccleston moment as the Doctor. It's just beautiful.
Christopher Eccleston always signed when he was pitted against Daleks. And it makes a lot of sense considering how his Doctor even came to be. And the whole time war. That, of course, that would be when he's at his most angry, most
primal.
Yeah, I mean, we literally saw him in Dalek, shrieking to the Dalek, "Hey, why don't you just die?" And, like, Jesus. Like, that's pretty harsh for somebody like the Doctor to say. And in this episode, he says, "And then after I save the humans, I'll blow every stinking Dalek saber out of the sky."
Yeah, it's fair to say Daleks may not bring out the best out of the Doctor.
Yeah, and that's actually some great Matt Smith moments with the Daleks too, now that I think about it.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that the Doctor says that according to some ancient legends of the Dalek homeworld, that he's known as the Oncoming Storm. And I believe that's a nickname that we hear a handful of times later on. And I just think it's sort of fun, just a little bit of, I guess, Dalek lore, that they have such a, almost, I don't know, I almost see the Doctor as some type of myth that's going to bring destruction on the Daleks. It's just sort of a little fun thing.
I mean, from their perspective, how could you not see that being the case if you're the Daleks? Every plan, it seems like they ever try to do, the Doctor is there and he stops them. I guess at that point...
Yeah, aside from the apocalypse element, but yes.
I mean, this is true. But they were playing the long game there as well. And speaking of the long game, what's also long is the Doctor's history. And that we can discuss in the timeline segment. That's the perfect segue, I promise. As listeners to this podcast know, the TARDIS Wiki has a personal timeline for each Doctor, including the extensive extended media, ranging from the comic books, comic strips, Big Finish and BBC audio, the multiple book ranges, and everything in between. Doctor Who canon, insofar as it actually has one, is a jumbled mess and has been forever. So we just like to see where the stories we're discussing fit into the universe as a whole, as continuity and the narrative timeline has always been of interest to me. And this two-parter takes place right after a short story from a comic book, The Many Lives of Doctor Who, the short story being Return of the Voski, which is interesting in a lot of ways. The Many Lives of Doctor Who was a 2018 comic, sometimes known as Doctor Who the 13th Doctor Issue 0, as what it was the 13th Doctor, or the 12th Doctor regenerating into the 13th Doctor, and as they regenerated into the 13th Doctor, we get all these story flashbacks from previous Doctors as the 13th Doctor comes into being, I suppose. And one of these stories is Return of the Vosi. And in this episode, the Doctor finally gets his memories back, and he tells Linda with a Y that they had just gotten out of Kyoto in 1336. And literally, this story takes place in Kyoto in 1336. So obviously, the writer of the story saw Bad Wolf, the Parting of the Ways. It's like, got you, fam. It's just a short 5-page story, not all that much to it. But it's kind of nice seeing Rose, Captain Jack, just doing things in especially comic book form. I just find it really interesting. After this, and something we'll be discussing sooner or later, is Born Again, which is a Children in Needs parcel from 2005. Only 7 minutes. It was the first Doctor Who's Children in Needs sort, which is a longer introduction, first or second time, depending on how you want to look at it, of Tennant's 10th Doctor. I believe there's even more references to Barcelona. But it's a kind of nice thing. It's on the complete Series 1 DVD set that we have. So that's almost certainly we'll watch it. But it's also on YouTube. I don't think it's in very good quality, but you can go find it. It's just a nice 7-minute short. And, well, I don't want to talk too much about it because we will be discussing it soon. But that takes place after this on the Doctor's timeline. I guess it's no longer the 9th Doctor, now he's the 10th. And that is one of the earliest 10th Doctor things we get to see. So that'll be fun to discuss.
Yeah, and that's something I've actually only seen once, if I recall. I mean, I'm not saying there's a lot to it. I do remember there's like at least 1 or 2 decent lines, but I've only actually seen that thing once. So that'll be actually really interesting to see again.
It will be, and I remember liking it. Obviously, I like Time Crash more just because it brings back Peter Davison's Doctor. But I just think it's a lot of fun. It's short. It's not trying to be a huge, big story. Again, it's only 7 minutes. Perhaps with credits, only 6 or 5 minutes. Very possible. And I don't know, it's going to be fun talking about. I know we gave, 20 minutes to Destination Scarrow, was it?
I believe that was that was the name.
So, I don't know, maybe we'll get 20 minutes out of this. I tell you what, it's not going to be as long as this one is.
But I think it's a testament, though, to, I guess on my end, how much I enjoy this. I'm not going to say this is like a perfect two-parter, but this is definitely like A material. It may not be A+, but it's like 97%. It's not far off. It's a really good 2-part episode. I think they could have probably done a few things better with the whole Bad Wolf story out. But generally speaking, I had like a blast revisiting this. A lot of it's just so fun, and I think it's a really good conclusion to Eccleston's time as the 9th Doctor.
Yeah, no, of course, Christopher Eccleston eventually does come back to do Big Finish audios, and those would be very nice to hear when we get to them in 2040. But I think Christopher Eccleston's Doctor is often forgotten on the whole. I don't know why. I can't really fathom this. But I know there are some Doctor Who fans who get into Doctor Who and they literally skip series 1 and they just start with David Tennant's Doctor, which is something I find an abomination, to be frank. But I guess I can't control how people watch things. But I mean, seriously, if you are going to want to watch Doctor Who, obviously there's a lot of different places you could start. But to me, it doesn't make any sense to start at series 2. I mean, if you're going to start at series 5, I could see that. If you're going to start at series 11 with Jodie Whittaker, that's fine. I wish you the best of luck. If you're going to start at series 14 with Sudigawa, that's fine. But starting at series 2 is just strange. And I know why. I know why they did it. It's because it's David Tennant. But hopefully, and I think it has happened, there has been more of a Christopher Eccleston resurgence, where people are coming to realize, oh wait, that was a damn good Doctor, and that was a damn good story. And it is good that he's getting his due, because he left in very bad standing with the fans and with the producers because of how he left, and there's all this back behind the scenes drama we're not really equipped to go into because this has been going on long enough. And there's a lot of he sad, she sad, but I personally take Christopher's word on basically everything. And it was just not a pleasant experience when he left. And for a long time, he didn't get respect from Doctor Who fans because of it, and because of some things he said at the time. But luckily, it looks like we're finally past that as a fandom, and we can appreciate his place in Doctor Who history as the 9th Doctor. And he'll probably always be overshadowed by David Tennant, but it does no one any good to sleep on this Doctor. Because from the first story Rose to this final 2 parter, he gave it his all in every single episode. And I just think it was a pleasure to rewatch the season. Yeah, and as for this 2 parter itself, I would agree with Michael, it's basically perfect. It works better perhaps than there's any right to. And I think part of the reason it works so well is because of the long game. And I know the long game is considered one of the worst episodes of this season. But without the long game, this wouldn't be nearly as powerful, this 2 parter. So just keep that in mind. We're almost talking about a 3-part story, in a way. Because the long game gave the setup that this needed to give it true power to show the Daleks' actual long game. And I don't know, I think it's kind of a cool connection. And on the whole, this just stands up so well. The scenes with Rose talking to Jackie, her mother, and Mickey are maybe some of my favorite in the episode. Because Mickey and Jackie are just trying to discuss normal life, talking about the pizza place that opened. And Rose can't deal with any of it because she knows that there's literally a war being fought for humanity. And she can't take part in it. And she wants to, and it's just so powerful. So yeah, this story as a whole, it's basically a perfect ending to the season. Yes, they could have maybe tidied up some of the bad wolf stuff, but it's, as the Doctor later say, timey-wimey. So maybe there's nothing you can do with the bad wolf stuff. I don't know. Either way, this is a very strong ending to the season. And at least Christopher Eccleston went out with a banger.
Yeah, naturally, well, I was curious to see what you thought about this one. I honestly think it's like a NuWho classic, but that's what we think. Let us know what you think. You can follow us either on Twitter at Brothers Mahoney, or you could just subscribe to us here, like and follow, as how the cool YouTube kids say. Are we the cool YouTube kids? I like to think so.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's good stuff, bruh. But actually, James, yeah, what do we have coming up next?
Up next, we have The Abominable Snowman, which is a second Doctor story with companions Jamie, as always, and Victoria. Now, this one's interesting because this is one of those ones that was lost and has since been reanimated. And I also believe they've put the whole colored version of this animation up on that Doctor Who Classics channel, have it there.
I believe so, yeah. Which, on a side note, if you want to experience some more Doctor Who and you have had a chance to watch a lot of the classic Who, I forget what the name of the channel is. Is it just a classic Doctor Who?
I think it's Doctor Who Classics.
Highly recommend you going to the channel. They're putting up pretty much every classic Who story. So I think it's one a day. So it's a fantastic resource if you want to experience some classic Doctor Who without resorting to either some online sites or trying to buy the Blu-rays/DVDs.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if they'll get literally everything. Obviously, they're updating every day. We'll see where they end up stopping. But yeah, no, it's a really cool resource, especially if you do have access to the DVDs. Now, I'm pretty sure the uploads are the DVD quality, not the Blu-ray quality, which makes sense. I get that. And I won't complain about it. I mean, you're getting free episodes. You're getting hours of entertainment. There's no point in hoping, oh, it's not Blu-ray quality. But yeah, so the interesting thing about the Abominable Snowman is that Michael and I have actually seen this one yet. We haven't even started it. We have the Blu-ray animation of it. And by the way, it comes both in black and white animation and in color animation. We'll be watching the black and white just to keep with the times of Patrick Troughton. And it also comes with, I believe, episode 2, maybe it's episode 3. We actually have that surviving episode. So we'll be watching that. But the rest of it, I think it's a 6-episode story. The other 5 episodes are going to be animated. So hopefully it's good animation. Fingers crossed. I didn't really like the animation in the Reign of Terror. But I know that there's been other animations that have actually worked pretty well. So I hope that this one's going to be good.
Yeah, but it should be fascinating because we haven't seen this one. And there's not that many classic Who stories that we haven't seen that we could see. Let me phrase it like that. There's a handful, but there's not many. So I'm really interested in seeing this, especially because Patrick Troughton's among one of my favorite actors. So something I deeply look forward to getting to.
Indeed. But that will be for another time.
That it will. But as always, we very much appreciate you taking your time out to listen to us. This has been Michael.
And I've been James.
You've been listening to the Brothers Mahoney. And have yourself a pleasant night.
And enjoy Barcelona.